an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Charmed Life by Diana Wynne Jones. The final chapters. In this section, it seems like Diana Wynne Jones really likes writing endings where all of her characters are gathered together, usually in an outdoor space like a garden, and things get explained. I'm fine with that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Patricia for commissioning this episode. Oh, Patricia's here. Sorry this commission took so long. I didn't want to bother while you were between computers. Not a problem. I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm just excited to finally get to read the end of it because for a while there, I had been reading the next section right after I finished the first section. But in part because of the computers and all of that jazz that was going on, plus some other like personal stuff that was happening, I just did not have time to read the next section. So, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, since there wound up being a wait between. I feel like it would have been, it's tough to record on something that you like consumed quite a while ago. So I'm glad that worked out. And yeah, this book has some surprises up its sleeve still. So to recap briefly what was going on before we reach chapter 15, because the last chapters of this are 15 and 16, and then there's like a bunch of very short like blurbs about some of the world building that she did here. What happened was that Kat's sister decides to leave our universe and jump into another one, causing a girl to get pulled into her spot. And that girl is named Janet. And it turns out I was right because I theorized for like almost from the beginning that Crestomancy and everybody pretty much knew that this was not Gwendolyn. And it turns out they did know. They were aware that something had happened. It took them a little bit to cotton on to exactly what it was, but they had a pretty good idea pretty quick. So the fact that Crestomancy didn't tip his hand, which could have avoided all of this bother, is very Dumbledore-y of him. But they wind up like being kind of blackmailed into getting some dragon's blood and going to the garden at a certain time and scattering it in a certain place. And it turns out that this opens like a pathway between the two universes, the one that they are in and the one that Gwendolyn went to. And what they plan to do is perform a ritual in which they kill Kat. And like initially, Kat thinks that they are taking one life from him, but it becomes very clear that they need to kill him outright. Like they need to kill him a couple times until all of his other lives are gone. And it's really sad when he realizes that Gwendolyn agreed to this with like no problem at all. She could not give fewer shits about the fact that he's going to be dead. And I feel for the kid like this. And what a way to find out. It's not even that you like overhear it when you're private and you can sort of like go and have a little like sad moment by yourself. He finds out that she doesn't give a shit in front of like a bunch of people who apparently know already that she doesn't give a shit. Like it's not even news to them. And it's such a bummer, guys. So we start off with them heading to the garden and trying to find a way in. And at first they can't quite seem to do it. Every time that they get to, start heading towards it, they wind up somewhere else, and the garden winds up behind them. Try keeping it in the corner of your eye and not going straight to it, said Kat. They did that. They walked slantwise with the garden, not really looking at it. It seemed to keep pace with them, and suddenly they came out somehow beyond the orchard into a steep walled path. Up at the top of it stood the high old wall with its stairway masked by hollyhocks and bright with snapdragons, breathing warmth out of its crumbling stones into their worried faces. I love that line. Breathing warmth out of its crumbling stones into their worried faces. Love it so much. So then they go into the garden, and it cycles through the seasons. And as somebody who is hugely into seasons and decorating for seasons and the way that, the world changes, I loved this idea so much. Do you guys hear my cat meowing? She doesn't do this often, but when she does, she's loud as hell. So first, okay, let's see. The little dip was full of spring flowers. Daffodils, scillas, snowdrops, hyacinths, and tiny tulips were all growing there in September in the most improbable profusion. There was a slight chill in the dip, which may have accounted for it. Janet and Kat picked their way among these flowers, shivering a little. There was the sense of spring, chilly and heady, clean and wild, but strong with magic. Before they had taken 2 steps, Kat and Janet were smiling gently. Another step, and they were laughing. "Oh, look," said Janet, "there's a cat." I had a theory about this, and I don't remember if I shared it or not, but we'll get back to it. But this cat is the cat that Kat... God, I just heard myself. This cat is the cat that Kat... no, but seriously, it makes sense. This is the cat that is made out of his violin. He calls the cat Fiddle. He let Janet rub his chin and stroke him. Then, in the most unheard of way, he let Janet pick him up and stand up, hugging him. He even purred. Janet's face glowed. She could almost have been Gwendolyn coming home from a witchcraft lesson, except that she looked kinder. She winked at Kat. "I love all kinds of cat." Kat laughed. He put out his left hand and stroked Fiddle's head. It felt strange. He could feel the wood of the violin. He took his hand away quickly. How weird is that? I love that moment. That's such a weird, the fact that she doesn't seem to notice it, I imagine that's the magic and the fact that he has magical ability, but, that would kind of throw me off as well. You don't want to touch a cat and feel wood. You want to touch a cat and feel awesome, soft, purring fur. They went through a white spread of narcissi, smelling like paradise, Janet still carrying Fiddle. There had been no white flowers until then. Kat began to be almost sure that the garden was moving around them of its own accord. When he stepped among bluebells and then big red tulips, he was sure. He almost, but not quite, saw the trees softly and gently sliding about at the sides of what he could see. They slid him among buttercups and cow parsley into a sunny, sloping stretch, and here was a wild rose tangled with a creeper covered in great blue flowers. Kat could definitely feel the sliding movement now. They were being moved around and down somehow. If he thought about the way the garden had also been moving about in the castle grounds, he started to feel almost as sick as he did in the car. He found it was best just to keep walking and looking. "Aren't we getting a lightning tour of the year?" she said. "I feel as if I'm running down a moving staircase." It was more than the ordinary year. Fig trees, olives, and date palms moved them around into a small desert where there were cacti like tormented cucumbers and spiny green armchairs. Some had bright flowers on them. The sun burned down, but they had hardly time to get uncomfortable before the trees circled around them again and brought them into a richer, sadder light and autumn flowers. They had barely got used to that when the trees put out berries, turned amber, and lost their leaves. They moved towards a thick holly full of red berries. It was colder. Fiddle did not like this part. He struggled out of Janet's arms and ran away to warmer climes. So, that's the coolest. The coolest. The trees and bushes around them now were embalmed in frost. They could see bright berries in bright casings of ice. Yet Janet had scarcely time to rub her arms and shiver before a tree met them that was a wintry mass of pink blossom. Straight stalks of winter jasmine hung from the next, in lines of small yellow stars, and then came a mighty black thorn tree, twisted in all directions. It was just putting out a few white blossoms. As it took them in under its dark hood, Janet looked up into its black twistings. "The one at Glastonbury looks like this," she said. "They say it blooms at Christmas." Then Kat knew they were in the heart of the garden. They were in a small bowl of meadowland. All the trees were up around the edges except one, and here it seemed the right season of the year because the apples were just ripening on that one tree. It stood leaning over the center of the meadow, not quite overshadowing the queer ruin there. As Janet and Kat passed quietly towards this place, they found a little spring of water near the roots of the apple tree, which bubbled up from nowhere and bubbled away again into the earth almost at once. Janet thought the clear water looked unusually golden. It reminded her of the water from the shower when it stopped Kat from burning. The ruins were two sides of a broken archway. There was a slab of stone which must have fallen from the top of the arch lying nearby at the foot of the tree. There was no other sign of a gate. "I think this is it," said Kat. He felt very sad to be leaving. "I think it is too," Janet agreed in an odd, muffled voice. "I feel a bit miserable to be going, as a matter of fact. How do we go?" "I'm going to try sprinkling a pinch of dragon's blood in the archway," said Kat. He fumbled out the crucible wrapper in his handkerchief from his pocket. He smelled the strong smell of the dragon's blood and knew he was doing wrong. It was wrong to bring this harmful stuff into a place that was so strongly magic in such a different way. But, since he did not know what else to do, Kat carefully took a pinch of the smelly brown powder between the finger and thumb of his right hand, wrapped the crucible away again with his left hand, and then, carefully and guiltily, sprinkled the powder between the pillars of broken stone. The air between the pillars quivered like air that is hot. The piece of sunny meadow they could see beyond grew misty, then milky pale, then dark. The darkness cleared slowly, away into the corners of the space, and they found they could see into a huge room. There seemed acres of it. All of it was covered in a carpet of a rather ugly playing card sort of design, in red, blue, and yellow. The room was full of people. They reminded Kat of playing cards, too, because they were dressed in stiff, bulky clothes and flat, bright colors. They were all trailing about this way and that, looking important and agitated. The air between them and the garden was still quivering, and somehow Kat knew they would not be able to get into this huge room. "This is not right," said Janet. "Where is it?" Kat was just about to say that he did not know either, when he saw Gwendolen. She was being carried quite near, on a sort of bed with handholds. The 8 men carrying it all wore bulky golden uniforms. The bed was gold, with gold hangings and gold cushions. Gwendolen was dressed in even bulkier clothes than the rest that were white and gold, and her hair was done up into a high golden headdress, which may have been a crown. From the way she was behaving, she was certainly a queen. She nodded to some of the important people, and they leapt eagerly to the side of her bed and listened with feverish intelligence to what she was saying. She waved to some others, and they ran to do things. She made a sign at another person, and he fell on his knees begging for mercy. He was still begging when other people dragged him away. Gwendolen smiled as if this amused her. By this time, the golden bed was right beside the archway, and the space was a turmoil of people racing to do what Gwendolen wanted. and Gwendolyn saw Kat and Janet. Kat knew that she did from the expression of surprise and faint annoyance on her face. Maybe she worked some magic of her own, or maybe the magic in the dragon's blood was simply used up. Whatever it was, the broken archway turned dark again, then milky, then to mist, and finally there was nothing but meadow again between the pillars, and the air had stopped shimmering. So, this is weird. Okay, hear me out. I know that the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland she wears black and white and red like a playing card. But is Gwendolyn the Red Queen? Because it's like the playing card, like motif on the carpet, and the fact that all of the courtiers were wearing really like flat colors, and that it was all sort of like garish and cartoony, just made me think of that. And maybe that's just, you know, what Wynne Jones wanted to evoke is the, you know, thought of that queen who was mad and just completely unreasonable. But the first thing that Kat says when this is over is he's like, oh, it looks like she's enjoying herself. And I'm like, Kat, there was literally somebody on their knees begging for mercy that she sends away and laughs at. What is wrong with you? This book ends with it being presented to us basically that Kat is going to be trained to be the next Crestomancy. And I don't see that that's such a good idea, because honestly, the more I learn about Kat, the stupider he seems. Like, he's got a decent heart, but he's not smart. And I'm not sure that I trust him with any of this. Like, the most I can say is that he's a kid, and I hope that he wises the fuck up. But honestly, I don't feel like most kids would have seen that particular scene, and their first reaction would be like, oh, but she's having a good time. Like, that's a weird reaction to have. I don't know. So, yeah, this whole thing is so... It turned, like... And later on, Crestomancy says to Gwendolyn, those people weren't doing what you wanted, you know. They were only pretending. And I want to know what he even means by that. Pretending how? Like, pretending to be afraid of her? Pretending to do what she said, but then not doing it? Because it looked like people were running around in this scene. So I'm curious what it is that he even meant by that. So here comes Mr. Nostrum. And it turns out that this, like, moment that he sprinkled the dragon's blood, it seemed to summon him. And he says, I told you 2:30, not midday. It was the merest chance that I had my hand on your signature. Let us hope all is not lost. He turned and called over his shoulder, apparently into the empty meadow. Come on, William. The wretched boy seems to have misunderstood me, but the spell is clearly working. Don't forget to bring the equipment with you. When you know that they're, like, set to kill this kid, this whole thing is just so much more gross. So, all of these different people pile in through this doorway. There are witches who are from, like, who are, quote, accredited. Most of the people who followed her were in their Sunday best, too. Warlocks in blue serge and hard hats. Witches in silk and bombazine and hats of all shapes and sizes, respectable-looking necromancers in frock coats like William Nostrum's, skinny sorcerers in black, and quite a sprinkling of impressive wizards who had either been to church in long black robes or playing golf in very freckled +4s. They came crowding between the pillars, first by 2s and 3s, and then by 6s and 7s, all a little hasty and startled. Among them, Kat recognized most of the witches and fortune-tellers from Coven Street, though he did not see either Mrs. Sharp or Miss Larkins. But this may have simply been that may have been simply that in no time at all, he was jostled this way and that in the middle of a large and steadily growing crowd. Spread up the meadow, surround the gate, leave no avenue of escape. Yeah, so no avenue of escape should have been his first warning. But guess what? Even if it had been, Cat doesn't think that they intend to kill him. He thinks they only intend to, kind of kill him, and they're just going to waste one of his lives. And really, what's the big deal when he's got 2 more after that? He does not value these things nearly enough. And he notices that Mr. William Nostrum has taken off his watch chain, which is made out of heavy silver. And he summons Crestomancy. When he arrives, he just appears. They fall on him, and for a moment, the willing warlock attempts to attack him, and the willing warlock apparently can do a kind of I was going to say a werewolf thing, more like a wolfman thing, where his fingernails and teeth grow into claws and fangs. But Crestomancy is able to stop him in midair and make him shrink down into a caterpillar. And for a moment, I'm standing there oh, okay. I think they don't know what they bit off, and they're not going to be able to chew this shit. This motherfucker has more power than they thought. But I was wrong, because it turns out that he has a very specific weakness, which is silver, and they know that. So they came prepared. And that is part of why Mr. Nostrum has taken his watch chain off. So they use that to stop him from being able to access any power, and then they use it to actually tie him to a tree. There was a scream of triumph from under the nodding hats of the audience, the scream of true witchcraft, which made the sunlight tremble. Crestomancy, even more disheveled than the willing warlock, was dragged out from between the pillars. So it's true, the touch of silver conquers Crestomancy. Yes, isn't it a nuisance? Crestomancy remarked. I love that. Crestomancy sagged as if he were tired. His hair hung over his face, his tie was under his left ear, and there was green from the bark of the tree all over his dove-gray coat. Now you've got me all tied up in silver. What do you propose doing? Oh, the worst we can, my dear sir, he said. Be assured of that. We're sick of you imposing restraints on us, you see. Why shouldn't we go out and conquer other worlds? Why shouldn't we use dragon's blood? Why shouldn't we be as wicked as we want? Answer me that, sir. You might find the answer for yourself if you thought, Crestomancy suggested. But his voice was drowned in the yelling from the assembled witches and necromancers. While they shouted, Janet began edging quietly toward the tree. She supposed Cat dared not move with Henry Nostrum's hand on his shoulder, and she felt someone ought to do something. Oh, yes, said Henry Nostrum, cock-a-hoop with pleasure. I have never heard that term before in my life. We are taking the arts of magic in our own hands today. This world will be ours by this evening. Come Halloween, dear sir, we shall be going out to conquer every other world we know. We are going to destroy you, my dear fellow, and your power, but before we do that, of course, we shall have to destroy this garden. I wouldn't advise that. There's a lot of magic. You'll find it really hard to do. And they're like, well, we know we can't destroy you unless we destroy the garden, so we're going to go ahead. And we know exactly how to do it. So, up you get, dear Gwendolyn. It's young Cat who has to go on here. He put an arm around the helpless cat, plucked him off the ground, and carried him toward the block of stone. William Nostrum bustled up, beaming and uncoiling his rope. The willing warlock bounced up willingly to help, too. And Cat manages to, twist away and escape. But, of course, there's, tons of people who can use magic here, and they all slow him down, and he just, falls flat. And Janet, who Nostrum still has not realized is not Gwendolyn, is yelling, like, what are you doing? And they're like, you know what we're doing. And he says, the garden has to be disenchanted by cutting the throat of an innocent child on that slab of stone. You agreed it must be so. And Cat was not as frightened as he might have been. Of course, Gwendolyn had known he had lives to spare, but he hoped his throat would heal after they cut it. He was bound to be very uncomfortable until it did. To his astonishment, Janet was snatched away backward into nothingness. The only thing which remained was a yell of surprise. "Oh, good," Gwendolyn said from the other side of the stone. "I got here in time." So she comes shuffling out in these, like, basically gold underwear. And, "Oh, good, you caught him. Just a moment." She marched over to Crestomancy, held up her golden underclothes in order to kick him hard on both shins. "Take that, and that." Crestomancy did not try to pretend the kicks did not hurt. He doubled up. The toes of Gwendolyn's shoes were as pointed as nails. Oof, that is rough, guys. And then Gwendolyn says, "Oh, yes, I thought I'd better come back because I wanted to see the fun, and I'd remembered I'd forgotten to tell you, Cat has 9 lives. You'll have to kill him several times, I'm afraid." "9 lives!" shouted Henry Nostrum. "You foolish girl!" Everybody is yelling at her, and she's yelling back. "If he has 9 lives, you stupid girl, that means he's an enchanter in his own right." "I'm not stupid, I know that as well as you do. I've been using his magic ever since he was a baby. But I couldn't go on using it if you were going to kill him, could I? That's why I had to go away. I think it was nice of me to come back and tell you, so there." "How can you have used his magic?" "I just did," said Gwendolyn. "He never minds." "I do mind, rather," said Cat from his uncomfortable slab. "I am here, you know." "We've gone too far to draw back now. We just have to discover his weak point. He must have one." And she says that she put all of his lives into a book of matches. They were easier to use like that. It's in my room in the castle. And they ask whether he can die without burning a match, and she says yes. "How many have you left?" He doesn't know. I had to use quite a few. He lost one being born, another being drowned. I used one to put him in the book of matches. It gave him cramps for some reason. Then that toad tied up in silver there wouldn't give me magic lessons and took my witchcraft away, so I had to fetch another of Cat's lives in the night and make it send me to my nice new world. He was awfully obliging about it, but he was awfully disobliging about it, but he did it. And that was the end of that life. Oh, I nearly forgot. I put his 4th life into that violin he kept playing to turn it into a cat fiddle. Remember, Mr. Nostrum? Someone took that cat away. We can't kill him at all. So, Horcruxes? Is that what we're doing? Now, no, it's not really, because Horcruxes, as we all know, are one soul split into different pieces. These are lives, which isn't the same as a soul, and they're all each their own thing. So it's not really, you know. But that's pretty close. Like, and the fact that she used them so cavalierly. I hate Gwendolyn so much, you guys. Oh, I hate her so, so deeply. I hate her. Like, there's a lot of characters that I have hated over the years, but Gwendolyn is a really particular kind of selfish that exists, and I know it does, but good Lord, it's hard to, like, it's hard to read. And the fact that she's the one that came up with the matches, I would like to know, like, where she even got that idea. I used one to put him in the book of matches. The fact that she got the idea to do that, and then she had to, like, use up a life in order to even accomplish that. And she used Cat's life in order to send her to another world. Which, that was my very question when this happened, was like, if they took her magic away, how was she even able to do this? I don't understand it. And if they took her magic away, did they give it, like, they took her magic, but she was stealing her magic from Cat. When she's gone, Cat is suddenly able to do magic. Is that simply because she's not around stealing his magic anymore? Or did they, taking her magic away, give it back to Cat without him even realizing it? Like, I assume it's just because she's not around to steal it anymore. But Patricia's talking. She says, like the kids that grow up to be psychopaths, most definitely. I think she had a little magic of her own and used her magic to access his. Ah, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. It was I who had the cat violin removed. The creature's around here in the garden somewhere. I doubt you, sir, very seriously. You are known to be a very wily person. You flatter me, said Crestomancy. Unfortunately, I can't speak anything but the truth tied up in silver like this. Henry Nostrum looked at his brother. That is correct, William said dubiously. Silver constrains him to utter facts. Then I suppose the boy's missing life must be here somewhere. So let's talk about this, because there is a moment here where one of the witches is saying, "That's right, dear, we must all hunt for the pussy." She turned to the crowd with a witch's piercing scream. "Hunt for pussy, everyone!" You know how in Kindle books it'll point out to you that people, like a particular line has been highlighted by a lot of people? Hunt for pussy, everyone has been highlighted like 175 times. That is literally the only quote in the book that I saw that I can remember that was underlined like that. So, thanks for being incredibly predictable, everybody. Good on you. Oh, Lord have mercy. So they're trying to get out and like check all of this, but they're walking the wrong direction and they have to go widdershins, yada, yada, yada. Cat, said Crestomancy. Cat. Cat did not want to talk. He was lying looking up at the blue sky through the leaves of the apple tree. Every so often, it went blurred. Then Cat shut his eyes, and tears ran out across both his ears. Now he knew how little Gwendolen cared about him. He was not sure he wanted any lives at all. He listened to the shouting and crashing among the trees, and almost wished Fiddle would be caught soon. From time to time, he had an odd feeling that he was Fiddle himself, Fiddle, furious and frightened, lashing out and scratching a huge fat witch in a flower hat. Cat, I know how you're feeling. We hoped you wouldn't find out about Gwendolen for years yet, but you are an enchanter. I suspect that you're a strong enchanter, a stronger one than I am when you set your mind to it. Could you use some of your magic now, before someone catches poor Fiddle, please? As a great favor, just to help me get out of this wretched silver so that I can summon the rest of my power. Cat was being Fiddle again while Crestomancy talked. He climbed a tree, but the willing warlock and the accredited witch shook him out of it. He ran and jumped from between the willing warlock's grabbing hands, a huge jump from somewhere immensely high. It was such a sickening jump that Cat opened his eyes. The apple leaves fluttered against the sky. The apple he could see was nearly ripe. "What do you want me to do?" he said. "I don't know how to do anything." "I know. I felt the same when they told me. Can you move your left hand at all?" You've got more ability in the little finger of that hand than most people, including Gwendolen, have in their entire lives, and the magic of the garden should help you. Just saw at the rope with your left hand, and presume that the rope is made of silver." So he does, and it takes like a second, and the rope is gone. And he's able to get out of it, and then he's able to get him out of the handcuffs. They can overhear everybody who's looking for this cat saying that it fell 50 feet and that it's definitely dead. But one of the others is like, cats fall on their feet. It's fine, I bet. We really do still need to find it. Go after the nostrums. Oh, right, that's right. Go after the nostrums is what he says to his fucking handcuffs, the 2 pieces of handcuff that he got off of Crestomancy. He took the handcuffs into and told them to be ferocious eagles. Get after the nostrums, he said. The left handcuff took off savagely as he ordered, but the right half was still a silver handcuff and it fell on the grass. Cat had to pick it up in his left hand before it would do as it was told. Cat looked around then to see what Crestomancy was doing. He was standing under the apple tree, and the talkative little man called Bernard was stumbling down the hillside toward him. Bernard's Sunday cravat was comfortably undone. He was carrying a pencil and a newspaper folded open at the crossword. And he looks up and is like, oh, shit, you need help? Do you need everybody? And Crestomancy's like, yes, please, bring all of them. Okay, so Miss Bessemer was standing above him on the slope. She had the works of a clock in one hand and a cloth in the other. Perhaps because of the slope, she seemed taller and more purple of dress than usual. She took in the situation at a glance. You'll need a full muster to deal with this lot, she said to Crestomancy. A witch in the muttering crowd screamed, he's getting help! Cat thought it was Gwendolyn. The smell of magic grew, and the muttering became like a long roll of thunder. The crowd seemed to be edging forward slowly in a bobbing of fancy hats and a bristle of dark suits. So Miss Bessemer wrapped her cloth neatly around her pieces of clock and grew noticeably taller. And this continues to happen. The rest of the family began to appear around the apple tree, all in the middle of the peaceful Sunday things they had been doing when they were summoned. One of the younger ladies had a skein of wool between her hands, and one of the young men was winding it. The next man was holding a billiard cue, and the other young lady had a lump of chalk. The old lady with mittens was crocheting a new pair of mittens. Mr. Saunders appeared with a thump. He had the dragon tucked playfully under one arm, and both of them looked startled to be fetched in the middle of a romp. The dragon saw Cat. It wriggled out from under Mr. Saunders's arm, bounded across the grass, and jumped rattling and flaming into Cat's arms. Cat found himself staggering about under the apple tree with quite a heavy dragon squirming on his chest and enthusiastically licking his face with flame. It would have burned him badly if he had not remembered in time to tell the flames they were cool. I like that line, too. Be like, okay, flames, I know you think you're hot, but you're not really. And that's how magic works. I'm here for that. I like that. So he starts to realize that well, first of all, the old lady says, we can't do anything more without Millie. And I like the idea that Millie is key here. I don't know if it's that Millie is particularly powerful or if she like closes the circle or what exactly her importance is here. But I just like the fact that she is key. And this is when Cat starts to realize that the dragon fire is starting to burn him a little bit. And he realizes that it's because his sister is siphoning off his magic again. For the first time in his life, Cat was angry about it. She's no business to, he told the dragon. And he took his magic back. It was like a cool draft in his face. Cat, stop that! Gwendolyn screamed from the crowd. Oh, shut up, Cat shouted back. It's mine! At his feet, the little spring ran bubbling out of the grass again. Cat was looking down at it, wondering why it should, when he noticed a sort of gladness come over the anxious family around him. Crestomancy was looking upwards, and a light seemed to have fallen across his face. Cat turned around and found Millie was there at last. He supposed it was some trick of the hillside that made her look tall as the apple tree, but it seemed no trick that she also looked as kind as the end of a long day. She had Fiddle in her arms. Fiddle was draggled and miserable, but purring. "I'm so sorry," Millie said. "I'd have come sooner if I'd known. This poor beast had fallen off the garden wall, and I wasn't thinking of anything else." So, Fiddle's alive, and I'm delighted. I was genuinely, very concerned about Fiddle. So things start to get pretty confused here. There's a lot of whirling white, and it's either snow or, let's see, where is it? Whirling white rain or whirling white snow, or perhaps just whirling white smoke, whirling and whirling. Cat was sure the whole garden was spinning faster and faster. Among the whirling and the whiteness came flying necromancers, or Bernard striding, or Mr. Saunders billowing with snow in his hair. Julia ran past, making knot after knot in her handkerchief, and Millie must have brought reinforcements with her. Cat glimpsed Euphemia, the butler, a footman, 2 gardeners, and to his alarm, Will Suggins once, breasting the whiteness in the howling, spinning, screaming garden. The spinning got so fast that Cat was no longer giddy. It was spinning rock steady and humming. Crestomancy stepped out of the whiteness and under the apple tree and held out one hand to Cat. "Can I have some of your dragon's blood?" Crestomancy said. So, he stepped in and he says, "It was lucky you didn't let Janet touch it." And he empties the whole pack of powder into this whirling, which turns it red. He could hear witches and warlocks howling with horror. Let them roar. Every single one of them has now lost his or her witchcraft. They'll complain to their MPs, and there'll be questions asked in Parliament, but I dare say we shall survive it. He raised his hand and beckoned. Frantic people in soaking wet Sunday clothes came whirling out of the whiteness and were sucked through the broken arch like dead leaves in a whirlpool. More and more and more came. They sailed through in crowds. Out of the whirling many, Crestomancy somehow collected the 2 nostrums and put them down for a minute in front of Cat and the dragon. Cat was charmed to see one of his eagles sitting on Henry Nostrum's shoulders, pecking at his bald pate, and the other eagle fluttering around William, stabbing at the stouter parts of him. "Call them off," said Crestomancy. Cat called them off rather regretfully, and they fell on the grass as handcuffs. Then the handcuffs were swept away with the Nostrum brothers and whirled through the archway with them in the last of the crowd. Last of all came Gwendolen. Crestomancy stopped her too. As he did so, the whiteness cleared, the humming died away, and the rest of the family began to collect on the sunny hillside, panting a little but not very wet. Cat thought the garden was probably still spinning, but perhaps it always did. Gwendolen stared around in horror. "Let me go! I've got to go back and be queen!" "Don't be selfish," said Crestomancy. "You've no right to keep snatching 8 other people from world to world. Stay here and learn how to do it properly. And those courtiers of yours don't really do what you say, you know. They only pretend." "I don't care!" Gwendolen screamed. She held up her golden clothes, kicked off her pointed shoes, and ran for the archway. Crestomancy reached out to stop her. Gwendolen spun around and hurled her last handful of dragon's blood in his face, and while Crestomancy was forced to duck and put one arm over his face, Gwendolen backed hastily through the archway. There was a mighty bang. The space between the pillars turned black. When everyone recovered, Gwendolen was gone. There was nothing but meadow between the pillars again. Even the pointed shoes had gone. "What did the child do?" said the old lady with mittens, very shaken. "Sealed herself in that world," said Crestomancy. He was even more shaken. "Isn't that so, Cat?" Cat nodded mulishly. It had seemed worth it. He was not sure he wanted to see Gwendolen again. "And look what that's done," said Mr. Saunders, nodding at the hillside. Janet was stumbling down the slope, past Millie, and she was crying. So, Cat has a moment here where he's like, "Oh, right, that's going to mean that I just yanked Janet out of her own world again. My bee." But it turns out that she was like, she did miss her parents, but she was like more concerned about her parents being worried about her. And it turns out that they didn't even notice that this other girl wasn't her. And the other girl that took her place was herself an orphan in her own world and had a pretty terrible life. And Janet read her diary and saw like how much happier this girl was here, and that maybe she had like taken it a bit for granted being with her parents, and sort of like decides maybe she wishes that she had stayed in the other world. And just as she's thinking that to herself, she gets yanked back. So it winds up working out quite well that like, and Crestomancy even tells Kat a little bit later that there was like yet another girl who was being pulled from one. It's almost as if everything was put where it was supposed to be the whole time. And so Kat's split-second decision winds up like working out. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Everybody decides that it's time to have something to eat now that the excitement is over. I want to make sure because, like, you know, we have this thing with all of these witches and wizards whose magic gets taken away. And I'm going to find this moment again. Came whirling out of the whiteness and were sucked through the broken arch like dead leaves in a whirlpool. More and more and more came. They sailed through in crowds. So this, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, is Crestomancy came whirling out of the whiteness. He is pulling all of the people whose magic he took because they were misbehaving and pulling them into another world, I guess. If that is happening though, doesn't that mean that he's destabilizing all of these worlds and that these folks are going to be replaced by another version of themselves? I thought. Unless them going through that archway isn't actually like taking them to other worlds. But I just assumed that that was what that archway was doing at the time because of it working that way for Gwendolyn twice now. Patricia says, I don't think he pulled them into other worlds. I think the archway can send them wherever he wants to send them, being a sort of portal. Gotcha. Okay. So he basically was just like, I took your magic, now get the fuck out of here, and sent them all home, probably. Which that's pretty satisfying, to be honest. I would have loved to actually see their reactions, though, as they realized that he took their magic away, because I really need to see the bad guys suffer. They were about to murder a child so that they could do what they wanted, and I need them all to... I just want to see them realize that they are being punished with something that is so much worse than the fate that they had to begin with, that they were railing against so much. Okay. All of the excitement has died down. They're all eating this like amazing picnic. Let's see. I can send you back, said Crestomancy. It's not quite so easy with Gwendolyn's world missing from the series, but I don't think it can't be done. No, that's all right. At least it'll be all right once I'm used to it. And let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. You were the one I was most worried about, Crestomancy said. I'm afraid I didn't realize at once what had happened. Gwendolyn had found out about the mirror, you see, and she worked the change in her bathroom. And anyway, none of us had the slightest idea Kat's powers were that strong. The truth only dawned on me during that unfortunate affair of the frog. And then, of course, I took a look at once to see what happened to Gwendolyn and the 7 other girls. Gwendolyn was in her element, and Jennifer, who came after Amelia, is as tough as Gwendolyn and has always wished she was an orphan. Whereas Queen Caroline, whom Gwendolyn displaced, was as miserable as Amelia and had run away 3 times already. And it was the same with the other 5. They were all much better suited, except perhaps you. Why couldn't you have told me you knew? I wouldn't have been nearly so scared of you, and you wouldn't believe the trouble Kat got into because of it, not to speak of me owing Mr. Bagwash 20 pounds and not knowing the geography and history here. She's not wrong. I apologize. Who on earth is Mr. Bagwash? Mr. Baslam, Kat explained reluctantly. Gwendolyn bought some dragon's blood from him and didn't really pay. He's asking outrageously much, said Millie, and it is illegal, you know. I'll go and have a word with him tomorrow, Bernard said from his hammock, though he'll probably be gone by then. He knows I've got my eye on him. So, why was it a troubling decision? Janet asked Crestomancy. Because of Cat. We would have felt a good deal easier if Cat could have brought himself to tell someone what happened. We gave him a number of opportunities to, but when he held his tongue, we thought perhaps he did know the extent of his powers after all. But I don't, said Cat. And Janet, who was becoming thoroughly cheerful now, was being allowed, oh my God, guys. And Janet, who was becoming thoroughly cheerful now she was being allowed to ask questions, said, I think you were quite wrong. We both got so frightened that we came into this garden and nearly got you and Cat killed. You should have said. Perhaps. Normally, we're more than a match here for people like the Nostroms. I knew they were planning something through Gwendolen, and I thought Cat knew too. My apologies, Cat. I wouldn't have had Gwendolen here for a minute except that we had to have Cat. Crestomancy has to be a 9-lived enchanter. No one else is strong enough for the post. We're all government employees here. The job Crestomancy has is to make sure the world isn't run entirely by witches. Ordinary people have rights too. And he has to make sure witches don't get out into the worlds where there isn't so much magic and play havoc there. It's a big job, and we're the staff that helps him. So they talk about how difficult it is to find 9 live enchanters. And he says he wrote to, like his father wrote saying his daughter was a witch and seemed to be using her younger brother in some way. Forgive me, Cat. I ignored that letter because your father had been so very rude when I offered to make sure his children would be born without witchcraft. Why didn't you say anything at all to Cat? Remember, we hadn't known each other very long. Cat appears to have no magic at all, yet his sister works magic far beyond her own abilities and goes on doing it even when her witchcraft is taken away. What am I to think? Does Cat know what he's doing? If he doesn't, why doesn't he? If he does, what's he up to? When Gwendolen removed herself and nobody mentioned the fact, I hoped some of the answers might emerge, and Cat still does nothing. Cat, at this point, stands up and says, leave me alone. He is a little bit frustrated by the fact that everybody's talking about him like he's not there. He doesn't like that they're all sort of treating him like a baby and not telling me anything. And he says, you didn't tell me things. You didn't punish Gwendolen because you were afraid I'd do something dreadful, and I haven't. I don't know how to. I don't know how. I didn't know I could. My love, it was just that no one was sure, said Millie. Well, be sure now, said Cat. The only things I did were by mistake, like coming here in this garden and turning Euphemia into a frog, but I didn't know it was me. And Cat was feeling so upset and tearful that he wondered whether to oblige Will Suggins and become a frog, or just be a flea instead. Why don't you be a tiger, he said. As Cat expected, Will Suggins made a beautiful tiger, long-backed and sleek and sharply striped. So I think that was him turning Will into a tiger? Yeah, it is, because Will says, all right, lad, you win. How did you do it so quick? I don't know, Cat said apologetically. I've really no idea. Shall I learn when you teach me magic? He asked Mr. Saunders. Well, no, Michael, said Crestomancy. It's quite clear elementary magic isn't going to mean much to Cat. I'll have to teach you myself, Cat, and we'll be starting on advanced theory, I think, by the look of it. You seem to start where most people leave off. So, they're talking about how he didn't know that he could do magic, and Crestomancy admits that when he was first figuring out that he had magic, it was like really inconsistent, and somebody figured out about the silver. And he had all of this stuff that he always carried in his pockets. A silver watch, 1 and 6pence, silver charm from my godmother, a silver tie pin I'd forgot to wear, a silver brace I was supposed to wear in my teeth. As soon as they were gone, I did some truly startling things. As I remember, the roof of the tutor's house came off. But that's not something that works on all crestomancies. That's just something that works for this one right now. So I'm wondering if there's anything other than the matches, because the matches is something that Gwendolyn put in place in order to control Kat's lives. But there's not something in particular that Kat, that naturally dampens Kat's power. So, I'm just because it's just basically Gwen that was the only one that was dampening it. Let's see. Oh, okay, right. So, is that Patricia says, and that he's left-handed. What do you mean? He's left-handed, holds back his magic? I'm not following you. I'll give you a chance to write that down. But I want to mention that at the end, he couldn't turn the handcuffed in his right hand to a bird. Oh, okay. He had to use his left hand. Gotcha. Right. So at the end, there's a couple of little sections. E-book exclusive extras. There's Who is Crestomancy, About Dressing Gowns, Related Worlds, Types of Magic, Crestomancy Castle, The Importance of Cats, The Willing Warlock, Onir, Tonino, and then The Worlds of Diana Wynn, which is an interview. I'm not going to go into all of this because I'm running out of time. And they're not super long. And most of them don't even tell you anything that you don't really know from the actual text. But what is the Crestomancy is pretty... Onir and Tonino are spoilers, though, for other books. Oh, okay, noted. So I saw those names and they meant nothing to me. So I actually basically skipped over those, which I'm glad that it turns out, in case those books come up later. I'm glad that I did not pay any attention to that, because I was reading those and I was like, I don't know who this is. Do you want those books to come up later? Do you? I am but a humble servant to you, ma'am. Please, whatever you like. So yeah, the talk about who is Crestomancy is basically what the job is, which he, detailed in this. It's not a job you can simply apply for. Only the strength and special skills of an enchanter can possibly begin to attempt to tackle the task. He has to be 9-lived, and most people, whatever their magical status, just have 1 life each. But they also have counterparts. People with 9 lives, and they are exceedingly rare, exist only in their own world with no counterparts anywhere else, which means that all have the talents and energies and abilities that would have been spread out across the others and are concentrated into one person. This makes Crestomancy a very powerful enchanter indeed. So one of the most challenging tasks a Crestomancy has to undertake is finding his successor, the next Crestomancy. This is never easy, not only because of the fact that 9 life enchanters are exceedingly rare, but they might not even be living in the same world. They also are usually completely unaware that they have more than the usual number of lives and often demonstrate a distinct lack of magical ability in childhood. They are often discovered for the first time when they begin to lose their lives. For example, if on Monday somebody falls from an extremely high tower, or is consumed by fire or gets hit round the head with a cricket bat, and yet on Tuesday is happily walking around with no noticeable ill effects, chances are he has 9 lives. This means he is then worth testing to find out what's stopping him from doing magic. So I like that's just all boiled down right here. And it also mentions how all of them have a weakness, that it's always going to be a different weakness. And they have to spend many, many years in training learning how to control it. So I'm going to move on real quick, and this will be the last thing I mention, but the about dressing gowns is one of my favorite things, because basically what she says here is that the Crestomancy can be summoned by anybody at any time, anywhere. So naturally, Chrestomancies become pretty preoccupied with making sure that they always look presentable. And they are always in beautiful clothing so that they present a very good picture, because who knows when they are going to be whisked away and where they are being whisked to. So in order to, just always be presentable, they especially indulge in really nice dressing gowns, because they, while they're sitting around in their slippers, they still might be pulled out somewhere, and a lot of their robes are so beautiful that they look almost like ceremonial robes to a lot of cultures. So it doesn't, unless they're wearing their slippers at the time, they will just appear to be like beautifully dressed. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. He's likely to be called away on urgent business at any time to any place. No matter whether he's having breakfast, about to go to bed, or have a bath, or simply being with his family. If there's a call for help, Chrestomancy has to go. And that's where the dressing gowns come in, because he never knows when he might be summoned. Chrestomancy has a whole collection of magnificent embroidered dressing gowns, which are just as splendid and important looking as any velvet suit he might own. Eye-catching designs he has been seen wearing include red and purple flowered silk with gold at the neck and sleeves, a flowing robe of bright pink and orange lined in scarlet, green with embroidered golden lions, sky blue with golden lions, long and black with embroidered yellow comets, lined in yellow with embroidered black comets. In fact, Chrestomancy has a different dressing gown for every day of the year, so it is very unlikely he would ever be spotted in the same one twice. They are such magnificent garments that they would easily pass for robes of office in most worlds, except perhaps for the odd occasion when Chrestomancy is quite obviously wearing bedroom slippers too. So I liked that a lot. I thought that was fun. So yeah, this is a fun book, and as far as the ending, I said at the beginning that Diana Wynne Jones loves writing an ending where everybody's in a garden and all gathered together. But I think out of all of them, this was the ending that I was the most satisfied by. It just made the most outright sense in comparison to something like Fire and Hemlock, which I think I liked that book overall better. But the ending was so confusing and opaque to me that I have to say that the ending of this one was better. But yeah, I prefer this ending, I think. And this was just a really fun, weird story that felt very mysterious, but mysterious in like a more fantastical way than a lot of them have been. So, Patricia says, I never noticed how quickly she ends books, but it is a thing. Yeah. And yes, I've read all of her books pretty much. How many has she written? You know what? I have to go. Don't answer me. But yeah, so thank you, Patricia, and thank you for coming and helping me out and talking me through some parts of this. I appreciate it. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed the coverage. And I will be maybe seeing you soon with a new episode of something else. So stay tuned, everybody. And thanks for listening. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.